So Overly Sarcastic Productions did Legend Summarize El Dorado. I've seen the movie from DreamWorks El Dorado at least twice now, so I'm probably an expert on this, and I know everything they're going to possibly cover. More importantly, there's a link below to the original video. If you haven't hit it already, why? Fix that. Do that. You did? Good. Let's get started.
1, 2, 3.
Called it! I called it!
Dorado, baby! A lost city of gold, adventure in the jungle, treasure in puzzles and maps and Uncharted, and everybody loves El Dorado, all right?
Uncharted?
Oh, yeah,
the game.
Has the narrative downside of being at minimum under 5 million tons of freezing saltwater. El Dorado is the kind of ancient...
Wait. Oh, Freezing Saltwater. That's the other one from DreamWorks, which was Atlantis. They did an entire series of lost cities, didn't they? Did they do a Shangri-La movie and I just missed it? Because that would be the next obvious one.
Ancient lost city that has zero drawbacks. An unspoiled ruin buried in the verdant jungle, full to bursting with treasures and gold and archaeologically significant historical relics. If you're a thrill-seeking adventurer, it'd be the quest of a lifetime. If you're a researcher, it'd provide a uniquely unspoiled window into a pre-Spanish Mesoamerican civilization.
And the best part is there are actually, in this area of Mexico and Central America, and I think South America as well, there are actual cities in that style just consumed by the forest and buried under history, to the point where people are still finding things as recently as this decade. It's insane. And honestly, as someone who just geeks out way too much about history, it's really freaking cool, man.
And if you're anyone else, well, who doesn't love a city full of more gold than you could ever possibly spend? Basically, El Dorado is more than just the archetypical lost city of gold. It's the most beautiful fiction I've ever seen. And the best part is...
Okay, considering how well read she seems to be, calling this the most beautiful is actually very high praise. I'm very considered. I'm very much considering this actually something incredibly interesting. I just want to see if she'll go into detail on why, though.
It's entirely the conquistadors' fault. El Dorado is pure, uncut, wishful thinking, and the history of the legend is an absolute trip. To start with, let's go all the way back to that mythical era of 1536,
because it was completely
when,
not
just a
understanding
few
what the hell they
decades
were
after
saying.
the invasion of the New World, the Spanish conquistadors hero local legend...
Hey, thank you for censoring that thing that definitely would be pulled up on YouTube. Even though it is literally a historical document, this is how things were shown. Yeah, El Dorado might be BS, but the actual historical value of cities in there, dude, it's so freaking cool. If I wasn't absolutely certain the trip up to Machu Picchu would kill me, and also it would require money, which is a thing that would be a problem to use, that would be awesome. For anyone who doesn't know, that's a city up in the mountains. I think in the Andes? No, that's not the Andes. That's in Europe. I know it's in South America. I don't know if it's Peru, Colombia, or one of the other countries down on the western shore. But it's incredibly cool looking. It's literally up all the way up on top of a mountain. It's so freaking cool!
Legend of a king who covers himself in gold dust as an offering to the gods. This legend is called El Hombre Dorado, or the Golden Man, and the conquistadors are very interested. In pursuit of this legend, the conquistadors end up finding the Muisca people, a thriving loose confederation located in modern-day Colombia and ruled by a system of 3 distinct leaders, a Zipa, a Zaque, and an Urraca. The Zipa and Zaque weren't exactly kings, as neither one of them held absolute power, but each ruled over a separate part of the Muisca, and they were pretty revered. The Urraca, meanwhile, was both a...
So 2 of them basically had the same thing as the Roman Triumvirate going on, in the sense that 2 of them had power, but weren't the only power.
Political leader and a religious one lived in the Sun Temple in Sugamuxi. The area they lived in was naturally rich in emeralds, but they also had a ton of gold they'd imported, and that gold played a major role in the inauguration of a new Zipa. Fun fact, the Muisca line of succession wasn't patrilineal. The title of Zaque and Zipa instead passed to the predecessor's nephew, the oldest son of their oldest sister. Now,
that is, so the oldest son of the oldest sister, meaning that if they didn't have a sister, they're kind of screwed. And if they didn't have an oldest sister, that is a very confusing one. I mean, it's not the weirdest thing, but I wonder how that entire situation came up.
When a new Zipa was crowned, he would be covered in gold dust and then jump into the center of the nearby Lake Guadavita, washing off the gold as an offering to Chia, the moon goddess. Along with the gold dust, gold trinkets and artifacts were also thrown into Lake Guadavita as part of the ceremony. Now, learning that this extremely profitable legend of the Golden Man was both true and within reach, the conquistadors did their thing, conquering the Muisca and enslaving their people in work camps called encomiendas. The conquistadors had really gotten this down to a science at this point. They'd been doing it for a while, and they seized an awful lot of gold. So... that's it, right? They found El Hombre Dorado and claimed all the gold. Happy ending, right? Well, that's the trick, isn't it? It wasn't enough gold. See, here's the funny thing about gold, right? It's pretty much useless except...
I'm sorry. I want to say this is photoshopped. I'm pretty sure this is photoshopped. But there's that small little part of me in the background going, come on, Airier. You know there's someone who actually does this. Even if the image isn't real, you know it exists. There is someone out there who has literal golden shits. Actually, considering all the places that plate food in edible gold, there's probably literal places where this is actually a profitable business reclamation. I hate everything about what I just said because I don't actually doubt it, and it just pains me. No.
As a currency and as a decoration. It's soft, it's heavy, it's useless for weapons or armor, and unless you're making a circuit board, there are better metals for basically every possible.
There's actually one other thing gold is really used for. Circuitry is the most profitable one immediately, and a lot of the rare earth materials that just look really fancy and really cool actually help on this level. The other one is that it doesn't really corrode. So a lot of the things we send into space, like Voyager, have gold-plated aspects because it just kind of holds up to stellar rays pretty well. Now, I mean, it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. Although it may be honey, but I don't actually know how good that holds up. But it's actually very useful for that. Also, there's probably some idiot out there in the future who's going to try and capture the Voyager probe because it has a bunch of gold on it. Because, sure, why not? I'm assuming that's going to happen. God, my nose is killing me. Yeah, well. One, two, three, four. Hey! Future me edited 8 minutes.
Use. Now, the Spanish were all about gold as currency, but the Muisca people and almost every other Central and South American civilization didn't have money-based economies. It was all about the barter, baby. So without using gold as...
Ironically enough, barter systems are still kind of useful everywhere because you get something useful for something useful that you don't need. You get screwed over a lot, and the basic currency advantage is that you can just take advantage of it more to move large amounts. But on the other hand, I'm convincing myself that barter is superior. Why did I do that?
Coin, the only other use they had for it was decorative, jewelry, sculpture, stuff like that.
Which is basically how we
use
it now.
As a non-corrosive metal, there's no better choice if you're looking for stuff to throw in a lake without...
I have no idea where this is, but this is so cool looking. Sorry, I love unique design buildings, and this is so freaking cool. Like the entire fishbowl surround, the well, the center of the things you can, I'm assuming, walk on, the glass plate, one giant emerald. I have no idea where this is, but I want this.
Ruining it. But put yourself into the mind of a conquistador for a minute. To you, gold is everything. It's money, and money means power and fame and a hero's welcome back in Spain and everything you could ever want. And these people are just parading around in the streets wearing your entire annual salary and not even noticing. There are two conclusions you can draw for what's going on. Door number one, the Muisca don't assign the same value to gold as we do, and since their economy is entirely trade-based with no currency as a middleman, they have no other use for gold than jewelry and art. They use it for display because it's sparkly and it doesn't corrode, and that's all that matters when you're not.
And I'm going to take a wild guess here and say door number two is they have a city made of it, and this is just showing their wealth. Which, I mean, that's actually what they came to, because we know that's what happened with the El Dorado myth. Even though apparently El Dorado was an actual practice they did, which I actually wasn't aware of. That's really damn cool.
Not assigning it an artificial social value. Door number two, these savages must have so much gold squirreled away somewhere that they can afford to just parade around in it like it's not.
They went full Pocahontas. You have no idea how hard it is not to quote a stupid meme about a mixtape of Harry Potter and Pocahontas that my wife loves. And admittedly, for husband points, I probably should reference it right now. But I have principles that I don't remember at the moment, so I won't do it anyways.
Nothing, and that means the real motherlode has to be hidden somewhere else. Now, we also need to remember that the conquistadors were not just a random assortment of fun-loving Spaniards from all walks of life. The people...
I mean, also keep in mind, and this is something that I probably should remind more people of, myself included, water was dangerous to drink for most people on ships because it would sometimes be infested and dirty and disease-ridden. So people drank beer and liquors constantly. Just remember, being drunk was not exactly the same as being drunk. Now a buzzed means like, okay, yeah, you got buzzed, that's good. Then being buzzed was to show that you were properly hydrated. And for anyone thinking, but Airier, beer is a diuretic, it would just dehydrate you. Yeah. I'm sure this never caused any problems at all.
People who chose to become conquistadors were people who wanted to conquer, enslave, and steal gold and silver from this brave new world so they could return to Spain grotesquely
Basically pirates,
rich.
but on land.
This is, one could say, a selection pressure that's likely to produce
The cultural self-awareness to recognize that there are fundamental differences between cultures and their social priorities, and what matters to you might not matter to them, and vice versa. For glory and God and gold! Or glory, comma, God and gold. Okay. Ironically enough, this is probably more profitable if you realize it, because they would literally give you something they don't value for something you might value, but much less than what they would give you. And it gives you a huge trade imbalance if you looked at it accurately and set up an entire process to get what they did not care about for something they did. It's actually something that happened later on, usually in smaller areas for things with the Native Americans in the English territories that then became the French territories that then became the American territories. I do mean territories because I do actually mean prior to incorporation of states into the country. But trade like that was not uncommon, which admittedly was way more peaceful than you would assume because, for correct reasons, there was a lot of bullshit around there. But that is one of the ways that that actually worked out well. Here, though, it was the conquistadors. Of course it was. I almost want to see if there's like an alternate history out there where they would just go and say, hey, here's a completely different culture that found them. Except considering all the cultures at the time were probably just as horrible. It really wouldn't have made a difference, would it? The conquistadors were the best at it. But only because they got there first. I'm sure everyone else would be just as horrible.
Here's a population of conquistadors that are overall much more inclined to kick down door number 2 than to ponder the anthropological possibilities of door number 1. They'd found El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man. They'd found a lake full of sacrificed gold, and guess what? It wasn't enough. It was time to shorten the name and start looking for El Dorado, the City of Gold. Or literally just the gold, which is honestly more...
Oh, El Dorado, the gold. El Hombre Dorado, the man of gold. Hombre meaning man. Wow, I actually remembered enough Spanish to understand that. I mean, she literally translated multiple times in the video, but I'm going to give myself a pat on the back considering my entire Spanish number is, sorry, not number, but number of words known is no, sí, meaning yes, and pulo, which I'm being told is chicken because this is YouTube. And nothing else.
More on the nose. Before we move on to that hot mess, I want to put a bit of a spotlight on what happened with Lake Guatavita because it's kind of hilarious. So the Zipa coronation ceremonies unsurprisingly left the lake pretty full of shiny golden artifacts, and the conquistadors wanted it. But lake dredging technology wasn't exactly peaking in 1540, so the process wasn't easy. In 1545, 2 conquistadors attempted to manually lower the water level with a bucket chain that took 3 months and only lowered the water level by 10 feet. But they did pull out $100,000 worth of gold by today's standards, so that
10 feet, and it was still that much gold. Holy shit. On the other hand, with buckets, they emptied a lake by 10 feet. That is not a small lake. That is admittedly very impressive for very stupid people. I mean, yeah, they don't have dredging technologies, but even just getting a net, anchoring it with rocks, and then scraping might have been more effective.
That's nothing to sneeze at, I guess. More than I get out of my swimming trips anyway. Then again, in 1580, an entrepreneur named Antonio de Sepulveda set up a workforce to dig a huge notch into the side of the lake, lowering the water level by 65 feet and retrieving $300,000 worth of gold before...
$300,000, 65 feet. So this is not a small lake. This is not shallow. This is a very big lake. For context, on the shores of oceans, there are entire stretches that might only be 20 to 30 feet deep. This is a very big, deep lake. Wow.
Before the notch collapsed and killed all his workers. Somehow he managed to die broke. Things then stagnated for a bit until 1898 when a British-controlled company, creatively titled the Company for the Exploitation of the Lagoon of Guatavita, set up a huge pump that drained the entire lake down to 4 feet of muck and slime, which hardened into concrete under the sun, rendering almost all the gold totally irretrievable.
Oh my god, seriously? They actually succeeded only to fuck themselves completely. I want to hear that again. That's actually amazing.
Slime, which hardened into concrete under the sun, rendering almost all the gold totally irretrievable.
And
they
baking
dredged
it in
up
for
a
the
small
next
amount of gold,
time it
under
fills up.
$80,000 by today's standards, and went bankrupt shortly thereafter. Gee, it's almost like this place is deeply sacred somehow, and fucking with it is asking for trouble. Anyway, it's been a protected site since 1965, so don't go getting...
Oh shit, it's actually still around? So it refilled. Considering what this looks like, that almost seems like a crater. Is this a volcanic area? I have absolutely no idea.
Any ideas? So anyway, with a meager absolute ton of gold in Lake Guatavita and no gold-paved streets in sight, the conquistadors started looking around for the real gold motherlode, El Dorado. And in the process, things got pretty crazy. In 1539, for example, the conquistadors got word of something called the Seven Cities of Gold, 7 wealthy pueblos located in what is now the Arizona desert. Chasing these rumors, the conquistadors found a handful of nice small towns, but no gold, silver, or turquoise among them. So they just conquered the place, enslaved all the locals, and set themselves up as the local government, like you.
And that's why there was a heavy Spanish influence, because, again, conquistadors. Yeah. Honestly, some of the places you see this architecture built into the mesas is so freaking cool. I'm geeking out so much on architecture in this entire video. I'm just geeking out about everything history and science related. I mean, I do that constantly in real life, normally outside of YouTube. Yeah, actually, I'm not justifying this. I stand by my geekery.
You do. In 1541, Conquistador Gonzalo Pizarro, the younger half-brother to Francisco Pizarro, who toppled the Incan Empire, hears a story from the locals about a valley to the east full of gold and cinnamon. Gonzalo organizes a huge expedition of 340 conquistadors and 4,000-ish locals, and they don't find a valley and a whole bunch of them die. When the expedition is forced to turn back, Gonzalo sends his buddy Francisco de Orellana to keep looking for this valley, and while he doesn't find El Dorado, he does find the Amazon River, which he names the Amazon after getting his ass kicked by a gang of warrior women. Very appropriate. In 1560, a group.
Wait, seriously? The Amazon River got named because a guy got his ass kicked by warrior women. That is one of the coolest reasons for a river's name I've ever heard. And that would also then go back to the Mediterranean Amazon from Greek mythology and then stolen by Roman mythology. And he would have known about that because Spain. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And why there's Amazons in Greece and Brazil. Huh. I didn't know they were directly connected. I thought it was just some weird aspect. I didn't know what that aspect was, and now we know. Neat. This story has been adapted into a handful of movie versions, one from 1988, something called El Dorado, der Carlos Saura.
A group of about 300 conquistadors are led by Pedro de Ursua in an alleged search for El Dorado, but this is actually a front for his real motive, which is to get rid of them. They're all veterans of the Incan conquest with nothing to do but stir up trouble, so he's just trying to keep them from breaking anything important by getting them as far away as possible.
Oh my god, it's literally the, hey, do something busy over there effect. It's literally busy work, but in the freaking Amazon. And somehow it is still less disappointing than what American vets happened to them after most wars. I hate that the conquistadors had a better retirement plan, and this is technically counting.
Unfortunately, he's killed by his second-in-command, Conquistador Lope de Aguirre, and the gang then marauds their way to the coast, ravaging native villages wherever they go. I'm telling you, I'm shocked that the conquistadors would be so backstabbing and recklessly destructive to the native population. They just seemed so nice up till now. Things take a bit of a turn in 1595 when an Englishman gets in on the action, one Sir Walter Raleigh, who's hell-bent on finding
Raleigh? And this leads to North America, right?
El Dorado because...
North Carolina?
Hold on, I think I've got this written down. Okay, because he heard of an account allegedly from a guy named Juan Martinez, who has no record of existing, but was most likely based on a real guy named...
I mean, Juan Martinez is one of the most common names out there. Hell, I have family members that have been called that because their names just happen to sound similar.
Named Juan Martín de Albujar, and Juan Martinez has supposedly been part of an expedition to find El Dorado being led by Conquistador Diego de Ordaz, but Diego de Ordaz's expedition had happened in like 1529, and he also died in 1532, and Juan Martinez supposedly had this happen to him in 1570, so the writer probably got Diego de Ordaz confused with a different conquistador, Pedro Maraver de Silva, who did search for El Dorado around 1568 and did have Juan Martín de Albujar on his crew.
How the hell are these people still alive? Like, this is just convincing me of one very simple fact. The conquistadors were not smart people. They were brutal. They were effective at brutality. They were not effective at not stupid. They did not do the smarts. It no think well much.
Crew, but whatever. So this Juan Martinez, who participated in search for El Dorado with Diego de Ordaz 40 years after
It's
Diego
literally
de
the
Ordaz
treasure
died,
map thing that someone made up and everyone else
was
believed.
captured by natives and taken to El Dorado and saw the streets all paved with gold and stuff, and he says that El Dorado is totally real. That's the story that made Sir Walter Raleigh go, I've never heard anything more legit in my entire life. Let's go. It's so...
You know, this is the second most infuriating thing I've ever heard because it's so obviously bullshit. But one, media literacy is never very good, and this time had even less. And two, it's only the second because I watched Tex do the video about Dr. Christmas. If you know the video I'm talking about, you know how much rage I am repressing right now. It physically pains me. I'm taking a second to say this to tamp that rage down at the memory. And if you don't, go look it up. It's a very interesting video if you don't need to worry about punching a wall through your computer screen out of sheer frustration and screaming at the top of your lungs to the point where your neighbors, who normally can't hear you because you have a soundproof room, hear you and call to see if you're all right because they're actually worried that they could hear you through said soundproofed room. It was a one-time thing, Miss Gonzalez. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say all of those words that may or may not have been in languages I didn't know at the time due to sheer frustration. Hopefully she doesn't see this video. I'll just have to cut that out later.
A bit Don Quixote, but whatever, let's roll with it. So not only is Sir Walter Riley on the hunt for El Dorado, he's really serious about it and is also a complete mess. He straight up kidnaps the conquistador Antonio de Berrio to guide him around before ditching him. But it doesn't stop there, oh no.
He ditched
Sir
his
Riley
guide.
has a lot of ideas about El Dorado. For instance, he's decided it's actually a city called Manoa and it's on the banks of a Lake Parime because that actual gold-filled empire with a sacred gold-filled lake wasn't good enough for him. He decided he wanted to start making up names. And he also...
Did he actually make that up or did he find it somewhere else? He probably actually made it up because his own memory was better. Dear God, tell me it was actually a dream.
Wants to claim El Dorado for England and use it as a foothold for a colony to muscle the Spaniards out of South America and get all that sweet, sweet New World money for...
Suck it, Spain. Oh my God. Otherwise, though, he's still not doing it for the dumbest reasons. It's just mostly dumb reasons.
Himself. Pretty intricate plan. Only one small problem. El Dorado wasn't cooperating. Raleigh couldn't find it, and while later explorers and cartographers would haphazardly throw Manoa and Lake Parime onto their maps of South America under the assumption that they were probably in there somewhere, there was never any evidence that either place existed. I will say this for them, though. If it wasn't for all those hunts for El Dorado, our maps of South America would probably be a lot less comprehensive.
Why is El Dorado on this map 4 times? Oh yeah, El Dorado, El Dorado. Are there any others up here? It's probably down below. British Ghana, Dutch Ghana, Colombia. Wow, Caracas? Oh, I didn't realize Caracas was such an old city.
Nothing gets the cartographers out in force quite like the promise of a secret lost city.
I mean, yeah, that's literally why a good portion of that was mapped, even though there's still a lot of parts of the Amazon we don't live in now. So if it's mapped, this was mapped centuries ago and then just kind of updated with Google Maps probably. Huh.
Anyway, in 1616, Sir Walter Raleigh, now old and grody, returns to the New World to renew the hunt for El Dorado and immediately ransacks a Spanish outpost, getting his son and his lieutenant killed and incidentally also violating a 1604 treaty with Spain, which leads to King James executing him to avoid an international incident. Good show, sir. Bully for you.
Why the hell did he get a name in North Carolina of Raleigh? Or was it somewhere else that's named Raleigh? It's probably a different Raleigh. It's a family name.
People continue regularly going on perilous expeditions looking for El Dorado or Lake Parime and keep turning up empty, and in a few noteworthy cases, a local comes running telling the governing conquistadors they've super found silver or gold in the rocks in some dangerous faraway location, and the expedition always goes herring off at top speed, and they always...
Yeah, this is just confirming my earlier statement. The conquistadors were idiots, and the locals played them for fools. On the other hand, the conquistadors were so horrible, and there were so many of them that, you know... Yeah. Frankly, if they didn't just have so many people and were not so well armed by comparison, they probably would have just died off entirely.
Always turn up empty and also usually die, and amazingly, they still keep...
But what if next time there really is gold? It's literally the gambler's... It's the sunk cost fallacy of a gambler. If I just put in another coin, I'll definitely win the slots this time. If I just hit another card, I'll definitely get blackjack this time. So what if I'm playing Jim Rummy? Who cares? Money!
Keep falling for it. I feel like the third time I got bricked into my own basement, I would stop falling for the Amontillado gambit. Also, as an extra bit of spectacularly entertaining stupidity, the conquistadors regularly turned up large amounts of platinum while searching for gold, but dismissed it as junk, calling it unripe silver, which is literally what platinum means. The locals had been working with it for ages, since it shares a lot of properties with gold, like being almost totally uncorrodable and relatively easy to work, and they had a lot of finely worked platinum ornaments that were literally completely unique to the region. See, ironically, the conquistadors...
They just had platinum all over the place. In art. I'm pretty sure platinum only gained value because, at least right now, It's really important in microchips, and a lot of technology does rely on trace amounts of it. But on the other hand, it's a precious metal. It probably had value prior to that just for its beauty alone. But I thought gold was the standard just because people assumed it meant wealth, and that's why it always happened to stay that way, other than actually finding use for it now. Just, it's sitting there. You know, I just probably should go on eBay and see if anyone doesn't know anything. It says unripe silver because it's just something handed down and snag it. At this point, that'd be so stupid. I would never expect it to actually stick around. But I'm going to probably look after this.
Didn't recognize its value because platinum is so rare, and at this point the conquistadors didn't know it existed. They were literally pulling out nuggets of the rarest precious metal on Earth and dumping it as scrap because it wasn't yellow. And if you think that's bad, Spain later had a small problem where people were using platinum to counterfeit gold coins since they were similar in weight and softness, and Spain responded to this financial crisis by dumping their entire national platinum supply into the ocean. This whole debacle is such an incredibly apt
It's valuable now, not then. Now, not then. And I'm just reminding myself of that out loud to hear my own words, to remind myself, yes, they literally just did everything this video started on. The entire, well, different things are not valued by certain cultures, and we're hitting that right now because they didn't value platinum, but we do. Very much so. I would love to get rid of their problem, take all their unripe silver and get rid of it so they don't have to deal with it anymore. In fact, I will do it for free. It's literally exactly what she said back here. Where was it? It's probably a bit around here. Whatever. You know what I meant with the different aspects. Oh, yep. No, the two. Yeah, here we go. If you can't see it, well, it's small. But the two different doors where it's like, here's the entire thing about how they value things, and this doesn't have it, versus God in gold. It's literally that right now is my entire reaction summing it up. Because again, we value platinum. They didn't. And it just is How have I never heard of stories about people going out and trying to find the dumped platinum on the ocean floor? They wouldn't be there. The currents are not that weak. They would have definitely been removed by now. But I'm assuming someone tried.
Metaphor for the flaws inherent in the colonial system and how the lust for gold literally blinded them to the true unique value of the New World that if I'd read it in a book, I would have called the writer a hack.
Yeah.
Oh, the colonizers dismissed the incredibly valuable and unique resource of the colony as worthless scrap because they're too busy digging for their own personal currency they've arbitrarily assigned value to. Yeah, nice. And I bet the real treasure was the friends they made along the way, right?
Oh, that's just bullshit. They didn't make any friends.
I swear, nothing owns colonial Spain harder than it owned itself. Anyway, the passion for the El Dorado search was already starting to die down only a couple centuries after it first came up. In 1743,
Only a couple centuries. That was at least 200 years of this bullshit.
Explorer and mathematician Charles Marie de la Condamine mapped the Amazon and many of its tributaries, and later wrote that he found no sign of any El Dorado and that the story was most likely the result of greedy conquistadors really wanting to hear that there was a magical city of gold they hadn't plundered yet, and desperate locals really wanting to get rid of these goddamn Spaniards, sending them off on wild goose chases just to get rid of them. A very bad combination, or a very good one depending on your perspective. By the 1800s, El Dorado was basically accepted as fiction, that if it were out there, someone would have found it by now, and that the only reason anyone ever thought it was real was simple wishful thinking with no factual basis. It would be cool if El Dorado was real. I personally think there's a serious lack of cool, unexplored things to discover in this day and age of precise satellite imaging and
Really? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things like that that are just hard to see because they're overgrown. And then there's the cave systems. Oh, and then some of the unique things underground, hell, most of the ocean floor is completely unmapped, and you still find terrible amounts of things all the time. Hell, during that entire debacle with the submarine that imploded, they found multiple wrecks that people didn't know anything about. And, I mean, they weren't what they were looking for, but just, there's so much that it hasn't been documented yet, and so many things that have been documented, but no one knows because there's just so much. It's information overload that it becomes lost in its own documentation. Honestly, I don't agree with that point just because there is so many cool things to look into, and this mythological aspects, it's so well documented that people lose track of it is unfortunately a thing. It's a byproduct of an information age, and we are very guilty of it, but it also means things can be rediscovered, and it's so freaking cool, man.
accurate world maps and stuff. But El Dorado is more of a cautionary tale than anything else. It's theoretically rewarding enough to make you wish it were real. It's just plausible enough to make you seriously entertain the possibility that it could be real. And most importantly, it's such a high bar that no matter what incredibly cool stuff you happen to find while searching for it, it'll never feel like what you're looking for. The conquistadors found a vastly wealthy empire that dumped gold into its own lake every few decades, and it wasn't El Dorado-y enough for them.
Hell, I didn't even realize there was a lake that still has gold dumped into it, and it's a real thing in the mountains in South America. I hadn't even heard of it right now. Like my entire point about undiscovered things due to information overload. This is it. I had no idea. Now I do, and it's so freaking cool.
It was never going to be enough. As the search dragged on and it became more and more obvious that the only El Dorado they'd ever hoped to find would be completely overgrown ruins or just a random lake, the appeal withered away. If it's not enough gold, it's not El Dorado, and they had to keep looking. And that's the fun thing about greed. It was never going to be enough gold. El Dorado is that rare myth constructed from nothing but wishful thinking. No deeper origin, no kernel of truth, just a lot of very greedy people eating themselves alive trying to find the one thing that'd finally satisfy that hunger.
Although, again, I'm going to come back to the fact that part of the myth actually had it. El Hombre Dorado, which I didn't realize this myth had anything in fact based, well, anything. So it's just really cool to even find that out right now. It's kind of like finding out, yeah, Santa Claus isn't real. I'm sorry for any kids who are watching. You had to find out eventually. I planned this entire point, and now you have suffered for it. But more importantly, you find that out, and then you learn later, no, it's actually based on a bunch of different people, including Saint Nick, who is the patron saint of whores. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Maybe they should have tried friendship. I've heard it's the greatest treasure of all.
Go.
The best things in life are...
Dude, what does that say? I tried to read it fast, but there's a lot here. Look, man, I'm not an economist. I barely understand how money works at all. But even I understand inflation enough to know that if you bring a metric butt ton of some precious material into your economy from outside circulation, it stops being a precious material. Unless it's something that actually does go bad or has a very standard lifespan, which is why food is actually a really good thing to invest in, because you have a very set amount of it. On the internet, it can be mass produced because it can be made, so it balances itself out that way. But it's never going to become completely useless because it will go bad if kept long enough.
For free.
And this is why we still treat natural diamonds as valuable. They're released into our economy at a very restricted rate to preserve their perceived rarity. It's called false scarcity. Also, there's a lot more about that in there. One, fake diamonds are actually very useful for mining. They have diamond-tipped diggers that are actually really fascinating technology. And they have it literally covered in artificially made diamonds because they're more affordable. And they do cut into rock. It's so cool when you see that stuff. But there's also the natural thing. It's not just that they're false or scarcity. It's that, but also the literal wars or pseudo wars fought over that kind of shit. Look up blood diamonds. Actually, you know what? Never mind. I've seen enough pictures. Don't look up blood diamonds. Just assume that the name is a good indication of what you're finding, and then don't. Because it's the internet. You'll get pictures.
You can keep them for the birds.
I'm learned more than I ever wanted to know about gold, platinum, and jewelry in general while making this video. I honestly would love if she just made a video about what she learned, because that's fascinating to me.
And bees, now give me money.
Nothing holds intrinsic value, only the value we assign to it within a space of our society. When two different societies meet, these values often clash, and if you're smart, you take advantage of it by taking what you value and they don't, versus what they don't value but we do, and seeing if you can benefit off it. Most people are not smart. So today we found out El Dorado was actually based on real life locations and cultures, and those places still exist. I'm sorry, but this is probably a first for me. I have come away from something on the internet not feeling slightly dirty and depressed at the state of reality, because this is actually hopeful. The last time I felt that was actually when the fusion trials came out that were successful and produced more energy than they took to make, and that was just like, geek moment. But this is the other time that's ever happened, at least in the last year. Prior to that, it would have been way longer than just a year since it happened. So, thank you, Overly Sarcastic Productions, for giving me that rare moment of hope online. I don't expect to feel it again, but hey, it's the second time this year, so hope for the best. Joking aside, I'm actually incredibly stoked about that. I kind of want to just go learn more about that entire lake, because this kind of stuff right now, finding out about these crazy cool locations that have no way to possibly be real, but then they are. This is so freaking hype, man. I love everything about this. So I'm going to go do that. If you don't mind, I'm going to log off and look up a bunch of things and probably spend way too many hours tonight staying up way too late on Wikipedia. Fuck it. It's worth it. I can deal with coffee. It'll make it up. So I'll see you guys in the next one when I'm admittedly sleep deprived and incredibly tired and may or may not hallucinate the entire video I record. Again. I mean, I've never done it before. So more importantly, I'll see you then. Adios.